Always the same. We will do just a moment of zikr or meditation. Allah, 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 Adonai, 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 Ram, 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 Buddham, 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 Tao, Tao, Tao. Ek Omkar, Ek Omkar, Ek Omkar, Toini, Toini. I like to begin always with a little meditation just to purify the atmosphere and remind ourselves that although we are studying extraterrestrial spirituality, spirituality is universal. Everywhere it's the same. We begin Bismillah by remembering the name of God. All right, so I'm going to do two things today. First, I just mention briefly an incident, which was the third time I had met an extraterrestrial that I can recall. It was about 1998. It was 1998. End of October or early November, I don't remember the exact day. But I was meditating, and I was then taken off of this planet. I really don't know if it was in my body or out of my body, because sometimes it's hard to tell. But it seemed like I was taken in my body, but I'm not sure. But in any case, what I remember is descending from the sky into a large stadium. It was not on this planet. It was somewhere definitely beyond the asteroid belt, beyond Jupiter, I think, somewhere between Jupiter and Saturn, perhaps. And there was this large stadium, which was either constructed or it was maybe a asteroid or moon or some, I don't know what it was, but it had been built into a large stadium. And as we came down, I saw that there was a table, an oval table in the middle of this large place of gathering, and there were 25 or 30, I don't know how many, but at least 2 or 3 dozen people, I should say, species, not only human species, but many of them, most of them were not human. A number of them looked just like human beings, but some of them were somewhat different also, and they were having a discussion. They were discussing whether they should stop an atomic war from happening on the Earth. Again. In other words, they had previously actually interfered and stopped atomic wars from happening that were about to happen on Earth. And now they were discussing whether they should do it again. They all were aware that a world war was going to start the next year, a nuclear war. And the discussion was whether they should stop it, prevent it from happening. It was a very interesting discussion because there were clearly 2 different points of view. One was that we should allow it to happen because it's been stopped by us before, and therefore people have not really woken up. People are still sleeping because they're not really aware of truth and reality. They're living in some sort of illusion. And if this war happened, it would wake them up. It would shock them into reality and understanding, I guess, that science and materialism is not all that it's been made out to be and that we've been thinking. So this was one point of view, that we should allow this war to happen. Others, including the person who I had been taken by, she was of the point of view that we should prevent this again from happening. But as the discussion went on, it became quite heated, and it became obvious to me that those who were arguing in favor of allowing the war to happen were gaining the upper hand. More people seemed to be agreeing with them, and they were definitely speaking more forcefully and loudly, and then suddenly everything became silent. And I was confused for a moment, what's going on? Then I saw everyone was looking behind me, so I turned around and looked, and there a personality was coming down from the sky, just without any conveyance, any machine or anything, just sailing down or coming down from the sky into the stadium. And he raised his hand and peace, only one word. And immediately everybody understood that this is a message from higher authority, which we have to obey. And most people were actually very happy, whether they were formerly arguing for or against the position of allowing the war to happen. They all, mostly all, they were happy that this decision had been made and it was clear now what they should do. There were some, it was very interesting to me, who were upset. They didn't like the idea that the decision has been taken out of our hands. But in any case, everyone knew they had to accept this decision, that this upcoming war will be prevented. So that was a very interesting experience, and that was actually the last time that I can remember when I was physically met an extraterrestrial, a large number of them. But I have had many meetings with extraterrestrials since then, but not physically. Or if I did, I don't remember them, because often many people have, like myself, not been able to remember clearly, at least, what had happened after meeting an extraterrestrial. But later the memory comes back one way or the other. So that's my 3 meetings I've now described with extraterrestrials, physical meetings. And now I want to move on to another topic, which I've been discussing in my Urdu chats more over the last few weeks, and that is a book written by Michael Salla. And I'm going to show you this book. It is called Exposing U.S. Government Policies on Extraterrestrial Life. This is by Michael Salla, PhD, and it tells about how the American government has recovered extraterrestrial craft, acquired extraterrestrial technology, and has disposed of them secretly and prevented anybody from finding out about them. So I'm going to read some of this book and talk about it. It's very important in my opinion. That's why I'm giving this class, to understand about extraterrestrial spirituality and the ideas that extraterrestrials have about spiritual truth. First, we have to understand a little bit more about the reality of different types of extraterrestrials, because there are different types of extraterrestrial beings, just like there are different types of human beings. Some are very good and kind and loving. Others are very selfish and exploitative and try to take advantage of others. Very same thing about extraterrestrials. So if we are fortunate enough, as I was, to meet a good person or to get information from a good source, Michael Salla is a very wonderful man, honest man, good researcher. And so I did meet him, and I bought these books from him, and I've been studying them. He's written a number of books. Since I met him about 2.5 years ago, he's written more books also. And I have in the past talked about his book on the on the alliances between extraterrestrials and different secret space programs, because there are a number of secret space programs, not only the United States, in fact, even before the United States, Germany in the 1930s and 40s had a secret space program and were in contact with extraterrestrials from whom they acquired a lot of technology and some understanding of reality. Similarly, the United States was the next country that gained extraterrestrial technology and met with extraterrestrials and signed agreements with them. So it may sound incredible, but this is a fact. And this book talks about these meetings that of course, it may have happened before that we don't know about. There are some indications that these are not so recent as we are discussing in this book, but evidently Michael Salla may not have known about earlier meetings, if there were some, between American government leaders and extraterrestrials. But his book begins by talking about February 20th, 1954, which was the date that President Eisenhower of the United States met in secret with a number of extraterrestrials. This was the first meeting, and later he had other meetings with other groups of extraterrestrials too. But I'm just going to show you, first of all, the first meeting that Michael Salla writes about in this book, and that was at Edwards Air Force Base on February 20th, 1954. And there have been a number of people who have come forward and talked about this meeting. Some of them were present at it, and others were either relatives or friends of the people who were present and reported about it. But in any case, I'm just going to briefly talk about, first of all, Don Phillips. He was a former U.S. Air Force and aerospace engineer with Lockheed Martin, and he is a whistleblower because he described secret documents in a film about this meeting. There was actually a film made of the meeting and that Eisenhower had in 1954. And Don Phillips writes, "We have records from 1954 that there were meetings between our own leaders of this country and ETs here in California. And as I understand it from the written documentation, we were asked if we would allow them to be here and do research. I have read that our reply was, well, how can we stop you? You are so advanced. And I will say by this camera and this sound that it was President Eisenhower that had this meeting, and it was on film, sort of like what we are doing now." So Don Phillips was recording this statement, and he said that in the very same way, President Eisenhower's meeting with extraterrestrials was recorded, and a film was made about it. So this is very significant. Somebody had asked me after I discussed this in Urdu chat yesterday, well, why only the United States? So that's why I said actually before the United States, Germany, and other countries also, leaders have met, and the United Nations also. Leaders, the Secretary General of the United Nations some years ago also met with extraterrestrials. So this is ongoing, not only the United States. But this particular book is specifically about U.S. government policies on extraterrestrial life, and it is about the American government's contacts with extraterrestrials, because that is what Michael Salla wrote this book about, but there are others also. So I just want to say one or two things. This information, again, is taken from this book by Michael Salla called Exposing U.S. Government Policies on Extraterrestrial Life. And Michael Salla explains that Don Phillips was by far from the only witness. There's also evidence which is called Servizio Informazione del Vaticano, SIV. So this information comes from a Jesuit priest who was working within the SIV, and he met with Cristoforo Barbato, an Italian researcher, and showed his credentials. So Barbato was convinced that this Jesuit was speaking the truth. We don't know his name even, but another Italian researcher also found evidence supporting this existence of this top secret Vatican organization, SIV, and he interviewed Barbato, and he discovered more details about the filming of this alleged 1954 meeting. And this is what he wrote. The Jesuit member of the SIV told Barbato that on occasion of the secret meeting at Muroc Airfield Base, by the way, Muroc was the old name, it later became known as Edwards Air Force Base. So the secret meeting at Muroc Airfield Base in 1954, military cameramen filmed the outstanding event with 3 movie cameras, 16 millimeters, detached in different places, loaded with color film, and working by spring engines. And that They couldn't use the electronics, or they had to run the cameras with spring engines because the Allied aliens and their spacecrafts interfered with the electrical engines of the biggest movie cameras. So they had to use these other spring-loaded movie cameras. So we have a lot of details from different sources. And let me just read one or two more passages about this. That James Francis McIntyre, the Bishop of Los Angeles, was also present in this meeting, Barbato wrote, and that he came to Rome, met Pope Pius XII, and who decided to found this organization, the SIV, with the aim to get every possible information about aliens and how they interacted at that meeting. And his son, Charles Suggs Jr., actually told this story about that his father had told him. So here is a report from Don. So Don Phillips reported that Navy Commander Charles Suggs accompanied President Eisenhower, along with others, on February 20th, and spoke with two white-haired Nordics. Nordics are Scandinavian-looking extraterrestrials that had pale blue eyes and colorless lips. The spokesman stood a number of feet away from Eisenhower